for f theta. This is something which we have started and we are continuing it for almost 2 classes now. This is the third class based on the idea of f theta. But then partial wave analysis, or when we talk about quantum mechanics, the derivation becomes kind of messy if you are not having a proper background. Okay, so it's kind of important. So the last class, I'll just go back and do that. Okay, I think this is important. That we said that if we basically consider a center of mass system, and we are considering the wave equation for neutron proton scattering. Okay, so what happens is I'm considering a system where we have a neutron and a proton system. That means you might have a neutron coming and hitting the target, okay, and not proton. So there is no question of charge as such, okay, but we can take that also, but we'll see that later. And then we can actually write down the equation for that, the Hamilton's equation, which will describe the wind motion, and this will actually be given by this. Okay, so you already know these things. Okay, very simple. And then we say that if the potential we are considering VR, which is nothing but the scattering potential, the form of the solution that is expected is e to the power I kz plus e to the power I kr by r f theta. This is very preliminary because if I am not wrong, you have done it even in your BSc also. You have considered the Schrodinger equation and then equation, and then you have found out that the solution is either in an exponential form or in form of sine or cos function, right? So this is actually depends on what kind of problem you are having. Then you solve it and you get these ones. So what we are doing here is we are generalizing the case, and if we can just recall this, okay, this is important to reiterate again and again. Okay, tell you again and again because this is kind of not very conventional. Again, it's important that this is scattering amplitude that we are interested in. Okay, and then this comes in because this partial wave analysis that we're doing here, we say that the plane wavefronts are basically a combination of a number of spherical waves. So if you're basically considering a 3D dimension, we do take spherical waves into consideration, and also d omega, which is nothing but the solid angle. So if we basically consider the scattering length, okay, we have already found one relation for scattering length, and we saw that at low energy S wave, which are nothing but spherically outgoing waves. So this is something which is nothing but the input, the plane waves, right? And the output is nothing but considered as to be the spherically symmetric waves. So this is the outgoing wave, and here we also consider the fact that L is equal to 0 because we cannot have a very large distribution of angular momentum that violates the principle of conservation of angular momentum and so on. Okay, so based on this, we actually can write down that f theta is nothing but e to the power I delta naught by k into sine delta naught. So please refer to your previous notes, the last, the 11th and the 12th lecture, if I'm not wrong. There we have derived this f theta value, and we know that if we consider this, the relation that we got was something like this: e to the power I kr by r into some function, and then we compared them, and then we saw that this is nothing but f of theta. Okay, so this is important, and that is actually a different part of derivation which will carry around 8 marks. And then we said that as per definition, we have gone this for a number of times, that the differential scattering cross section, which is sigma theta, is nothing but square of the amplitude. Now this square of the amplitude is important because in quantum mechanics we know that if we basically have a value, let's say e to the power I delta naught, to bring in a physical significance, we take the square of that. Okay, so probability of finding a particle and a certain region is nothing but chi star and so on. Okay, so the same idea is here. So this is the differential cross section f theta square, which is equal to sine square delta naught by k square. Eventually we see that we consider delta naught to be approaching 0. So this part of e to the power I delta naught will become 1, right? So we have not considered it here, but even if you consider, don't get confused. Later on you will see that this term vanishes. Okay, so this sigma theta is independent of theta, and then the scattering is nothing but a spherically symmetric in nature. Okay, so this term symmetric is very important because what happens is whenever you are conducting any kind of experiment and you don't have any symmetry into it, the mathematics or the calculation or the physics becomes more and more complicated. Okay, that is how it works. So even if you consider quantum mechanics and if you want to study the state of a system, and let's say that system is a very complicated system. Let's say I want to study iron, okay, iron system. So basically it has got how many 56 as the value of A, okay. So it has got a very high atomic number and mass number. So that means each of these electron, each of these proton will have a own set of equation. So what we do is we consider the ground state, and then let's say we consider a simpler atom, let's say hydrogen or helium or something like that. We analyze that, and we know that this is going to be nothing but something which is regular in nature, okay, symmetric in nature. So we can actually analyze that part and then use it to understand the system which is more complicated. Okay, so this symmetric word is actually very important in physics. Okay, once it is not symmetric, you will see that it becomes difficult to analyze it. Okay, so we take that term very seriously. So then I have to find out total cross section. So total cross section is nothing but the scattering cross section over the entire region. Okay, and we know that this is nothing but forming a cone shape. I think the idea is very simple because we are considering a three-dimensional picture here. So we're just integrating sigma theta over d omega. Now, sigma theta is independent of theta, as we have seen from the relation. So what we do is we take this term out, we just integrate over d omega. So d omega means the entire solid angle. So solid angle is nothing but it subtends an angle of 4 pi. So it is 4 pi. So what happens is now this is something which is more tricky. Okay, we need to understand this, and that's why I'm repeating it and taking some time. This is important. So when we do it, we see that k square is at the denominator, and then sine can be taken at the denominator as well, and we can write it down as cosec square delta naught, which is equal to 4 pi divided by k square plus k square cot square delta naught. Now this is where mathematically it's okay, but then you have to understand the physics here. What exactly happens here? So what happens is if k reduces, that means k is 2 pi by lambda, the energy also reduces because of this relation. I think I have explained it the other day. So if k tends to 0, this part will 0, this part will also tend to 0. Something divided by 0 is not defined, right? This is more or less an infinite value. So I have to do some kind of, I have to develop some kind of concept or some kind of idea based on which I can say that this particular relation is defined and not infinite. I cannot do anything for k because it is approaching 0, but this term is not k alone. This also has got a term cot square delta naught. So it's quite logical that I can actually play around with this angle and give a valid physical interpretation of the equation. Okay? And that's why we are going to take this and consider the limiting value. Consider the limiting value. Okay, this is how we do in physics. We assume things, okay, and then we see that it actually fits into the model. So as energy decreases, so we say that as energy decreases, k also decreases, quite obvious. And then if this k keeps on decreasing, this sigma total will keep on increasing, right? So this sigma theta or sigma total both will keep on increasing because k is at the denominator for both the cases. So what we do is we are actually see that if k tends to 0 becomes very less, okay, limiting condition, this sigma total and sigma theta becomes infinite. So that means that I cannot really interpret this result, okay, and this becomes quite meaningless after so much of hard work. So basically I need to use some conditions here, and this is where we start today. So if this is clear to you, it actually comes under the topic of partial wave analysis. And partial wave analysis, if you have considered your quantum mechanics seriously, you might have studied. Even if you have not studied, I don't think it's going to be very difficult because I'm giving you all the equations. The book that you can follow for partial wave analysis is Saitya Prakash, okay, Quantum Mechanics by Saitya Prakash. You can look into that because if you go and check a nuclear physics for understanding partial wave analysis, I think that won't be the right approach because nuclear physics usually just takes the result from partial wave analysis and mathematical physics cannot explain it. Okay, otherwise book नहीं बनेगा, बहुत ज़्यादा हो जाएगा. It will be volumes of books. Okay, not possible. So you have to just take the books from other sources. Okay, so quantum mechanics, you can take any book. If you have any other quantum mechanics book, you can check partial analysis if you are interested. Okay, so what we are going to do now is we are going to put the limit. Okay, so what happens is if we say that sigma total or sigma theta is infinite, it means that the number of scattered particle is infinitely large. Okay, This is something which we want to restrict, because if it's a large system, definitely studying it will become more and more complicated. So what happens is we consider this k cot delta naught as the limiting value. Okay, in the limiting range we are considering this, so that this equation 2 will remain finite as k tends to 0. So my aim is that sigma total, which is 4 pi by k square plus k square cot delta naught, should remain finite. For that, I consider k cot delta naught to be finite. Okay. So please remember, I'm saying a lot of things to you. Okay. But for exam purpose, whatever is there on screen, that is more than enough. Okay. Yeah, I'm just saying this because it's important to understand this. So what we do is we say that this k delta naught, you will take minus k delta naught as 1 divided by ak. Eventually you will see that this minus is not going to make much of an effect because this is square term, right? So what happens is that sigma total is equal to 4 pi divided by k square plus 1 divided by ak whole square. So I am assuming this. Okay. Now the question is why I am assuming this, because if this is tending to 0, then this is going lower and lower, and if this is tending to 0, this, suppose let's say ak is tending to 0, this is also going higher and higher. So we have got one value which is approaching towards 0, this is approaching towards the larger value, and both of them will actually give you a finite result, okay, mathematically, and that's why it is 1 divided by ak. So this is what we assume here. Okay, but the assumption is still not complete. Other things we need to check. So this AK, what is this AK? This AK is called the scattering length for energy E. Okay, this AK gives you the scattering length for energy E. This is important because that was the heading of our topic, the scattering length. We are going to find out the relation, okay, a simplified thing for this, okay, but here a lot of maths are there, limits. So that means that sigma total to remain finite as k tends to 0, we need to have this term defined. That means if limit k tends to 0, k cot delta naught must be a finite value. Okay, we have assumed that k cot delta naught is nothing but 1 divided by k ak. Okay, and that means that if we consider this limit k tends to 0, minus of 1 divided by ak is equal to minus of 1 divided by a. Okay, so this a, that means, because why I'm writing down a, because I have already put the limiting value. Okay, in limits, you know, I hope you remember, if you say limit let's say x tends to 2, okay, if we write down this limit x tends to 2, because we are taking the limiting value, okay, x tends to 2, and let's say I want to write down 2x, so that means the final answer would be 2 into 2, which is 4. That means there is no more variable there. So here we don't put any more k, we are just writing down the value as minus of 1 by a. This 1 by a is called the Fermi scattering length. This is the Fermi scattering length. Okay, so this is important. So we are considering the Fermi scattering length here. Okay, and then this has actually got a definite value. Okay, this is more or less will come out to be a constant value. Okay, depending on what kind of system you're considering. So what happens is, if we say that limit k tends to 0 sigma total. Now this limit I put only on a part, okay, but I have to look into the original equation. What was my original equation? My original equation was this. My original equation was this, okay, this equation. So here also I have to put a limit. So what I will do is I'll put a limit here, I'll put a limit on this side and find out what is the result. Okay, so let's do this. So when we put this limit sigma total, and then limit k tends to 0, this is 4 pi divided by k square cot square delta naught, and then if we put k tends to 0, this part will become 0, 4 pi will remain 4 pi, 4 pi will remain 4 pi, and this k cot delta naught limit k tends to 0, you distribute it, you can actually distribute the limit with the different parts of the equation. So then we can actually have it as minus of 1 by a. So just put minus of 1 by a whole square, and then finally what we get is nothing but 4 pi a square. So if this a square is a measure of length and we consider it 4 pi a square, okay, we are actually finding out nothing but the area. So this is what is the cross sectional area is all about. Okay, so if you say something like differential cross section, we are interested in knowing what is the area within which it is effective. So here also, if we say 4 pi a square, that means this is the area within which it is attractive, okay, or sorry, effective, okay, this is effective, okay. But then I will just put a question to you, okay, I want you all to think about it, okay. Probably I'll take some time so that you can answer it better. Why there is a minus sign here? We can just take a plus, right? Why we need to take a minus sign? I think 1 divided by ak is logical, because if this reduces, okay, then this entire thing will increase, this will reduce, this will increase, add them up, you're going to get a finite value mathematically, okay, under some limiting condition. But then they have put a minus sign here, okay, and then why they have considered a minus sign is something which you should think about, okay. So then this minus sign actually doesn't have much of an effect on the final result, because it's squared term, okay, very important. So this is what is called the Fermi scattering length A, okay, which is actually important. Now if we go back to this equation, we have got f of theta, okay, f of theta. What was our interest? What our interest was to find out what is the amplitude, okay, amplitude f theta. So f of theta was e to the power minus I delta naught by k into sine of delta naught, which we have seen before, okay, marked as equation 1. So this says that the scattering will remain finite. Now what we are saying that with the scattering will remain finite. I don't want to go into an infinite system where the scattering is at a very large distance. I cannot really read it, okay. So just to keep the scattering as finite, we know that k must tends to 0. This is what we have observed from this. K must tends to 0, so that this scattering will remain as a finite value, okay. So if k tends to 0, what happens to this? Because this is actually related to the scattering, right? This is related to the scattering amplitude. So that means this needs to be analyzed. So if we say k tends to 0, and if delta naught tends to 0 in this limit, okay, so if only k tends to 0, and if we put limit k tends to 0, this entire thing will again become infinite, which is not true, right? Which is not true. That means if something is there in the denominator which is approaching 0, okay, something should be there at the numerator also which is actually approach a value, okay, which is close by, so that if you take a ratio, mathematically it's a well-defined value. So if delta naught approaches 0 and k approaches 0, then only we can say that the scattering length will remain finite. Now if delta naught approaches 0, then you can just drop this sign, okay. So sine of delta naught will be delta naught, okay. For very small values of delta, sine will be delta naught. So limit k tends to 0, delta naught will also tend to 0, okay. So that means we can take this and delta naught will tend to 0. So now if we actually consider this, okay, if we consider this, so you see here, put delta naught is equal to 0. So this will be e to the power 0, which is nothing but 1. So what remains is nothing but delta naught divided by k. So this is quite simple, I think. If this tends to 0, okay, and this also tends to 0, then this, in the limiting condition, okay, it's not 0. If it is 0, then 0 by 0 is again undefined, but we are considering limits here. In the limiting condition for very small values, okay, in a very layman's term, we can say for very small values. So if we consider a very small value, we can say that this k tends to 0, then this small value divided by this small value will actually give you a finite result, and that finite result is nothing but minus of a, okay. And this is also like we cannot exactly say that this is exactly minus a, but what happens is this is equivalent to the Fermi scattering length. This is equivalent to the Fermi scattering length. Minus a is the Fermi scattering length, okay. So if we just go back, okay, I think I can go back here, okay. You see that with k, it is actually nothing but related with minus of 1 by a. So that means if it is 1 by k, this will be nothing but a, okay. And since we can take this, we can say that this is very almost equivalent to the Fermi scattering length. So this is actually nothing but what we call as the amplitude. So when we begin this discussion on the scattering length, we were interested in finding out the value of f theta, which is actually nothing but minus a. So again, I'd like to tell you that partial wave analysis, you have to do it via using some book, but then this is okay for this particular part of the syllabus, okay. So this is what is there for this particular topic on the nucleon scattering. Okay, we have a lot of things there, but these are more advanced, so we are not just going to look into it. Okay, we have to stick to the syllabus. And this was actually something where we talked about that we have got a uncharged particle hitting a charged particle and so on. Okay, or target is charged, the nucleon. What happens if we have got a charged particle hitting a charged particle? So that means we are talking about a proton scattering. So whenever we are making things complicated, that means we are using additional forces into it. The mathematical analysis also becomes a bit more complicated. Okay, so since we are not having that in our syllabus, we are not going to look into the quantitative part. We are just going to have a qualitative discussion of one slide on the proton scattering. Okay, but from here what we can see is that the amplitude of the scattered wave, that means f theta, in the limit of zero energy neutron. So that means neutron is coming, and limit of zero energy means that we are having the projectile energy less than 10 MeV. Okay, so that energy is not going to make much changes to the nucleon, so that is important. It's just a limit. Okay, limit is the important word. It's not zero energy neutron, of course. It is equal to the negative of the Fermi scattering length. Okay, so it is basically going to be a range of Fermi scattering length. You know, Fermi 10 to the power minus 15 meter and so on, right? So it comes from the name of Enrico Fermi. Okay, so we basically have it in the range of 10 to the power minus 15 meter or a bit away from it. Okay, the order doesn't change much. It will be within the vicinity of the nuclei, the study. Okay, of course, that is important. Well, we are studying the nuclei, we are not studying the empty part, we are not studying the vicinity of the electron. Okay, so we are concentrating only on the nuclei. So this is what is the conclusion for scattering length is. For the exam purpose, I don't think you need to write so many things on what I said. This is only for explanation. Whatever is there on the slide, you can definitely write it down. What happens with proton scattering? So we're just going to have a qualitative idea. We're not going to do much of mathematical analysis here. And in the proton scattering, what happens is uh, these scatterings are actually easier to perform and basically more accurate than the neutron proton scattering. What happens is, in order to realize that there is a neutron being scattered by the target becomes more difficult for the simple reason that neutron are chargeless. Okay, but proton, as soon as there is some kind of deflection, okay, and as soon as there is some kind of change in its path, we know that we are more or less closer to the nuclei. Okay, so this makes very much a good sense to say that it's easier to perform compared to neutron proton scattering. Okay, so what happens is there are protons, monoenergetic proton, and I think I've told you before that having a stable state of neutron is difficult because neutron decays to proton very fast. So what happens is proton, you can actually get a beam of proton and hit the target. Okay, so this is possible because of this. And then protons are readily available over a wide range of energies. Okay, what happens is you know accelerator physics. Okay, accelerator physics is something which you have in your partially you have it this semester. Next semester for high energy physics you have some part of accelerator physics. So what happens is in accelerator physics that you have those particle accelerators which we talk about like in CERN and all. Okay, there we have got those atlas and all. Okay, where the people are working. India is also a member. And then nowadays if you're doing any kind of work on nuclear physics and all, working there will actually give you relevant information. Okay, or relevant work. The work will be very much relevant to today's nuclear physics age. And people are getting Nobel prizes out of that. Okay, Higgs boson and all, 2012 Nobel Prize. So we have a very good setup there. Okay, and people are working on there. Scientists are working there, and they actually you can actually have a proton which is coming out at a very fast speed and hitting the target. Okay, these kind of experiments are carried out in India. Also we have it. Okay, but we don't have it on that large scale. Higher energy protons, if you want to generate, you cannot really have that setup that simple. Okay, it's very complicated and it takes a lot of cost. So these are accelerator technology which are being used, and protons can easily be designed there, okay, and then we can use it. So if you remember your lower classes, cyclotron, synchrotron and all, these are all nothing but particle accelerators, okay. It's only a part of particle accelerator, it becomes more complicated. So what happens is, again, the being charged particle, protons are very easy to collimate. So I hope you have come across this term collimate, okay. You have a spectrometer, you have a collimator there. What happens is, collimate means it will actually make the protons or the charge, okay, connection went off. Okay, I think I'm back. Yeah. Okay, so what happens is, when the neutron is not charged, it is very difficult to collimate because it does not deflect under electric and magnetic field. So I cannot collimate it that easily, okay. But proton, it is more easy. And then finally, the angular distribution of proton can be easily measured due to the fact that they are easy to detect by their ionizing energy. So if we can detect it, okay, because of its ionizing energy, okay, how much energy it needs to ionize, okay, or you can say you can have a film around that you can actually have a zinc sulfide screen and see what are the images formed and all. Based on this, you can actually have an idea about the angular distribution of proton possible, okay. So that is also a factor. So that's why proton-proton scattering are easier to perform than the neutron-proton scattering. So this is where we stop, okay, and then we are going to continue this class. In the next class, we are going to talk about Yukawa meson theory. Okay.